There it is.
Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Sorry about that. So a little bit about snakeheads in a way of an introduction. So in the picture here are the culprits. There's actually 4 snakehead species within the United States. We're going to focus on the northern snakehead, which is the only species that's actually in the Delaware River. These others are in the other 48 of the lower continental. Snakeheads come to us from Asia, Central Asia, in China or Korea or Russia. And they were thought to have been introduced to the U.S. by the live fish market. And then back when they were first found and saw to be spread as invasives, the Federal Lacey Act in 2002 banned the importation and cross-border transport of these fish. They're still being distributed within the United States and certainly within the Mid-Atlantic through, for instance, illicit intentional releases. So somebody intentionally puts them in the water because they desire to have snakeheads in that area. But mostly through incidental releases that were not intended. For instance, a dumping of a bait bucket they didn't know they had the fish in there, or were transporting aquatic hitchhikers. But they certainly came into the Delaware Basin, and it's thought that they came in through the Chesapeake Potomac drainages. Within Pennsylvania, they may not be sold, bartered, possessed, transported within the Commonwealth, and they're managed as an invasive species under chapters 71.6 and 73.1 specifically. I'm pretty sure New York, New Jersey, and Delaware have similar regulations. I just don't know their code. Identification of snakeheads, certainly when they first became prevalent in the lower Delaware Basin, folk were trying to figure out how the best way to identify them. Key characteristics for these things is this nice soft non-spine dorsal fin or the anal fin. These are very long fins, but they remain separate from the caudal fin, which is a round fin here. And then these fish have a slightly compressed head, which is very distinctive, with the eyes a little bit more towards the top of the head. And then males tend to be a little bit darker than the females. And certainly they can get some size to them as we see in this picture. So identification was always an issue, and people were getting them confused and still do, and myself included. I have to take a good look occasionally with the bowfin. Bowfins are native to the Delaware drainage. The difference again is these long dorsal spines, dorsal fins that don't have hard spines. But on snakeheads, it's a long anal fin, but on a bowfin, it's more of a short rounded fin. And then the other characteristics is this pelvic fin is right next to the gill plates, whereas on a bowfin, it's much farther back, well away from the gills. And again, we get to see that nice compression of the head that's very typical to snakeheads, but not the bowfins. And when they were first introduced as well, and first becoming aware in the Delaware drainage, people are having trouble with American eel. So in this drawing here, American eels, they're just a tube fish, very long, cylindrical, but their dorsal and anal fins is one continuous fin all the way across the caudal, whereas snakeheads or bowfins, it's a very distinct caudal fin. So a little bit of the life history, what they're looking to, or how are they surviving. Adults get to a very large size, certainly over 30 inches. They're short-lived, fast-growing. So on average, adults are 5 to 6 years of age. And within the Mid-Atlantic, we've had observations of a maximum age around 8 years. Generally, they achieve maturity to when they can start reproducing in 2 to 3 years of age, but it's been documented in invasive explosive populations, for instance, the lower Delaware. They could start reproducing as early as a 1-year-old or 2-year-olds. Reproduction does occur in late April through August, and it's been shown or seen that up to 5 spawning events per season for an individual fish may occur. Adults attend a nest, and this here is an example of snakehead nest. It's in a weed bed. It's a little hard to see in the picture, but the adults will clean up and break up the weeds, create a depression, and then the eggs are in a mass there. They're not adhered to anything. They're just staying in that nest of which the adult will then start to guard. These nests are located in shallow, warm waters. So a little bit more about what they are and how they're ticking. They are predatory fish. They're very voracious. They feed together in their schools and generally are active at the dusk to dawn hours. They like the low light. They won't generally feed during strong daylight or in the middle of the night. Juveniles, the small fish, they'll go for insects, small crustaceans, amphibians, and other fish larvae. Once they get some size and age to them, they're getting upwards of 4 to 6 inches. They'll swap and become primarily forage on fish, certainly minnows and other forages of those sizes. Panfishes, it's been shown they eat a lot of bluegill. And certainly other game fishes. It's pretty safe to say if it fits in their mouth, which is quite large, they're going to eat it. The best notable characteristic, not best, sorry, but a notable characteristic of snakeheads is their ability to breathe air. They can actually survive up to 4 days on land as long as their gills stay moist. And this enables, or this is what really helps them be prolific and moving around into other water bodies. Being able to breathe air, they can endure transportation to other waters without having to be in the water itself to breathe. As long as those gills are moist, they can draw oxygen directly from the air. Juveniles have also been shown to wiggle or flop into other water bodies nearby. Adults really can't do this. Their pecs and anal fins don't have strong, hard spines, so they have nothing to push against. And water bodies have to be generally close. But again, they got 4 days up on the land to try and get across to something, should they desire that. In terms of habitat or what they're looking to occupy, they're found in a wide range of freshwater habitats from lakes, creeks, rivers, swamps. But what they're really looking for or preferring are these slow moving stagnant waters, particularly with mud bottoms and plenty of vegetation, because that's where they like to spawn, those shallow, warm waters of vegetation beds. So here's a picture this past early September this year. New York DEC went out and found that snakehead 2 miles south of Callicoon. But it was this is a back eddy area of the river. And again, it's very shallow. A lot of grass was in there and stagnant. Snakeheads are thermally tolerant. They're found in a wide range of temperatures. And they can certainly be cold tolerance coming from Central Asia. They have the same temperatures that we do in the United States. They can survive under the ice. They're going to make it through winter. But during the summertime, they're looking for these warmer waters in these stagnant waters. And being able to air breathe, they can tolerate low oxygen waters, which also helps them generalize to other habitats. In distribution, we have this map. So Pennsylvania's here. This is Maryland, Delaware, and Jersey. They were found in the mid-Atlantic area of Maryland back in the early 2000s, 2002. And these fish can swim considerable distances, 15 to 20 miles in a day. And it's thought that they immigrated up through the Chesapeake system, through the C&D Canal. And then we started finding them initially in FDR Park. And certainly they're prolific through Darby Creek, which is exemplary for them for the shallow, aquatic, warm water that they're looking to find. So they have become, they're within the continental US, but within Pennsylvania, particularly the estuary waters or the lower river, they become well established in these counties. This was made back in 2021 in January. unfortunately, we now can add Pike and Wayne counties for the Delaware River itself to this map. I'm unaware if of any occurrences, though, of snakeheads within tributary waters or lakes within these counties. So far as I know, it's only within the main stem waters. And what's happening, I believe, is that from these well-established populations down here, they're starting to range expand and move up through the basin into other waters. So principally, or the reason why folk are nervous, I certainly am, in terms of northern snakehead, is they are predatory generalists. Again, if it fits their mouth, they're going to eat it, and they focus on fish. And this poses an unknown risk, for instance, to threatened and endangered species. So, for example, bridle shiners are threatened fish, state and federal listed, I believe. They stay within aquatic vegetations, and if northern snakeheads are going to stay in the vegetation beds, I'm concerned that they're going to start focusing on eating the bridle shiner. I put this picture in here. This is an eel elver. The Philadelphia Water Department several years ago in the tidal Schuylkill have consistently been capturing snakeheads and cutting the bellies open, and they're finding them full of eels, the elvers, as they're moving up. And so since they're such a strong predator, the concern is that there's possibilities to deplete prey populations. And then the other concern is there's considerable dietary overlap for other fish-eating game fishes, for instance, walleyes or bass. And then what that means is food may become limiting. There may be shortages or increased competition for it. Feeding habits and habitats are going to change, and possibly the behavior of the other species as they're trying to compete for limited resources. And we're also concerned at this point, we don't know, or it's unknown, the extent to which northern snakeheads may transmit or propagate disease through the system as well. In terms of monitoring, the Fish and Boat Commission has developed a snakehead species control plan. This is in draft. It'll come out eventually for public consumption. But what we're asking is to use angler reports to help characterize distribution and occurrence of snakeheads within the Delaware Basin as well as across the Commonwealth. In terms of other monitoring, I maintain monitoring for trout, which was under the Joint Fisheries Investigation Plan. That investigation has been closed, but we're continuing the sampling under it, and this is in partnership with the state of New York. We are focused on the trout population. So one of the benefits of this is if we start seeing acute declines in the trout population, we can go back to the angler reports to see if snakehead could be a possibility for changes population of trout. We also maintain annual monitoring at fixed sites for other game fishes, for example, bass or American shad or walleye. And again, as populations change dramatically and acutely, we can hopefully relate or not relate that to angler reports to see if it's predation from northern snakehead. So we're going to rely on angler reporting. This is an example of a poster that Fish and Boats puts out on various notice boards. And we're asking anglers, if you do encounter it, not only report it, but please harvest them. And then throwing them on the bank is not enough. Because they're air breathers, if we throw it on the bank, they're just going to sit there, and then once you move away, they'll get right back into the water. And it can be up to 4 days later if they decide to sit there. So they could play dead, look dead, but actually not be dead. So we're asking anglers, if you get them, harvest them, but cut them or put them in bags, and then put them on ice or in the freezer, and then dispose of them in the garbage so that they actually have been killed. In terms of reporting, the posters usually at the bottom will have the linkages. In this case, this is the link that we use. And we're asking anglers to just give us an idea of when you caught it, what water was it from, a general idea of the location, or even better, a GPS location, and several pictures so that we can look at the fish and certainly, beyond a doubt, identify it as a snakehead. This is another example of a poster that's prevalent in the upper Delaware. This came from the Park Service, and they've been putting them on our poster boards, as well as New York side as well. There's a bunch of agencies listed here. All this information generally goes into a singular database maintained by the federal government. Just make sure one of these agencies gets the anchor report. In terms of management, I cannot stress prevention is the best management. Please ensure all gear, including your boat, and particularly the live well or vegetation that's on the trailer is cleaned off prior to moving on to another water. Because they're air breathers, small juveniles or fry or young can get into that algae and get on the trailer. And if you go directly to another water, that's how they're hitchhiking across water bodies. And while they're in the Delaware River main stem itself, I would like to use and stress prevention to hopefully keep them out of lakes or reservoirs, or possibly some of the headwater tribs that we have. And certainly, according to the Aquatic Hitchhikers program, we'd like to have everything cleaned and dry before it comes in contact with water, and dispose aquarium fishes and plants in the garbage as well. So just to keep stressing, if you find one, report it, and then harvest it, and then make sure it's dead. I appreciate your time. That's what I have. And we can move into some questions. Ashley, are you going to stop recording, and do you want me to get off this PowerPoint for questions, or what's your pleasure?
I'm going to take you off co-host, and I'm going to keep recording, okay?
Okay.
And if anybody want to go around the room for questions, maybe?
Has anybody in here ever eaten one of those?
I don't think I run an eel rack in the river, just rode there over here, and I fought one this year, September 22nd. And I turned
Did you eat
it
it?
in John Hamilton.
Yeah.
26 inches long. Woo.
Yeah,
I heard they're fairly tasty.
I was smoking like that.
Take them home and eat them as you get them, I guess. Yeah.
Are they edible? I mean,
No, I've heard I know that, like, well, I mean, they came from Japan and they were very edible in the Asian community. And I think that's how it got populated over here through the Asian community. But I hear they're fairly edible. I don't know. I've never eaten one. I don't know.
I just took this all, I froze it, took it on the froze it. He come up right away.
Yeah, Doug, we appreciate you notifying us of that one you caught in your eel weir. We did turn that over to New York DEC. They did try to do stomach content analysis, but there was nothing identifiable in its stomach. It had been, whatever had been in there had been digested for too long.
Did anyone answer the question of whether the fish is edible?
Yes, they're edible.
Yes, they're edible.
Yeah. Trying to understand the scope of these fish. How many have been caught, let's say, in the last 12 months? Is there any way to have a handle on that? Is it just a handful, or anglers not targeting them, so they're not that many being caught? What's the story with the harvesting of these fish?
I can answer that question for the Delaware River in terms of as far as what I know about it, since July 31st of 2020, there have been 4 that I know of that have turned up in the upper Delaware. The one angler caught July 31st, 2020, and 2 were caught in eel weirs this last fall. One in the lower East Branch and one in Doug Case's eel weir south of Narrowsburg. And then we did get another report of an angler caught one at the New York DEC Narrowsburg access toward the end of August. We didn't hear about that till a couple weeks later. And I don't know what became of the fish, but so 4 that I'm aware of. Daryl, did you have anything more on that?
Oh, those are the ones that I'm aware of. And folks, right now, I think they're out exploring where and what they want to do with the upper Delaware. I think they're pretty low abundance right now based on the angler reports that we're seeing. It may be a few years, if ever, if they become prolific, if at all.
Last question. What's the theory on the eel weirs? The eels are being caught because they're doing a migration out to the sea. Does it look like these bowfin are also part of that, doing a downstream migration?
No, no, snakeheads do not migrate in terms of spawning migrations. So what they're doing right now is they're just moving around the system and finding if where they're at is better or worse than where they were. They're being moved around. So for instance, the well-established population in the lower Delaware, they're moving up so that they're limiting competition from their fellows in the lower Delaware. And now they're made their way up into the upper reaches, and they're searching around for habitat. So the catching the eel weirs is probably when they're swimming across the river, which is shallow, and they just happen to get swept up in the eel weirs.
And is there any theory about the extent of how far up will they go all the way to the tailwaters of the Pacton and Coshocton, Cannonsville, or is that water get too cool for their liking in the summertime?
Well, it's possible for them to go up that far. It's an easy swim for them, but again, they're looking for that warmer water in the summer for when they're looking for that shallow, warm water in the aquatic beds. And generally, the tailwaters to the reservoirs are cold, fast-flowing waters. And while there are spots within those tailwaters that may feel or may seem usable by the snakeheads, and we may be able to find one there, it's not hot, so they may not be there for long. They may be just testing it out. Hey, I don't like it. It's still too cold for me in terms of summertime temperatures, and then move back out.
I just wanted to add to something I said earlier. I forgot to mention that New York State DEC collected one snakehead in a year ago, September, electrofishing in that location that Daryl showed the photo of in that back channel area south of Callicoon. And yeah, that kind of habitat would be typical for them. DEC also did eDNA sampling throughout the area they electrofished, which was suitable habitat for them north of Callicoon all the way up to Lordville, from what I understand. A lot of slow water habitats. And the location where they did capture the one electrofishing was the only location they got a hit on one through the eDNA sampling. So that's encouraging. We don't think they're very widespread yet, but they could become more so in the future.
Very much. That was very
we've been hearing about, so we're glad to get the definitive information on this.
Mm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was gonna sit there and I realized, you can't sit there, I can't sit there. Of course.
Hey, I'll just add one other item on the snakehead. I think you're aware that we've have had a fisherman catch 2 snakeheads in the Bashkill wetland, which is a tributary to the Neversink River, which is of course a tributary to the Delaware.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, if we're done with the snakehead discussion, I'd like to say thank you to y'all and I'll bid you a good night.
Thanks, Daryl.
All right, thank you.
Next